Please be seated. May the grace of God the Father and the peace and communion of Jesus Christ and the comfort of the Holy Spirit rest on each one gathered here today or watching the live stream or watching a recording of this service later on. First, let me welcome you all on behalf of the family and thank you for your attendance. It means a lot to us. We have gathered all together to thank God for the life of Annie Linda Funk Thiessen, our sister or sister-in-law, our aunt, our great-aunt, our friend, our confidant, to find comfort in this time of need and to place ourselves in the presence of God, whose love knows no end in time or in eternity. Even though all of us have never met before in person as this group, and likely never again will all meet together as this group, nonetheless we are a community that shares a very special bond. We all knew and loved Anne. In that sense of community, I call on each of you to recognize that we also share, to a larger or lesser extent, the faith that Anne herself professed and lived so faithfully throughout her life. When I first met Anne before I married Val, I was impressed by her immediate embrace and acceptance of this strange young prairie boy with such long hair who was going to sweep her little sister away from the majestic mountainous setting of the Fraser Valley and take her to the frigid and boring plains of Saskatchewan, and who was spouting such revolutionary ideas as, for example, seeing Scripture as largely metaphorical rather than the literally uttered Word of God. I knew at the time that Anne might not agree with my youthful and perhaps too cocky theological pronouncements, but she listened to me and Val as we spoke of our convictions. And to my knowledge, she never condemned me, never told me I was wrong, never contradicted me. And that spirit of listening, of trying to understand, of not judging, that has continued throughout the rest of the time that I knew Anne. And that's how I knew that Anne loved me. I expect that many of you can echo something quite similar to my experience. Her curiosity, her interest in what others thought, her drive to know what drove others, these were the hallmarks of Anne's personality and of her love. And then, so often she followed up with her own unique contributions to whatever needs were expressed. As a teacher, especially a teacher of young and eager minds, she was a creative and effective mentor. As an auntie, she was a loving and dedicated family member who never, ever forgot a birthday or a special occasion. As a sister, especially as an elder sister after Herta died, she was wise, courageous, and generous. As a member of different churches and denominations, she gave her considerable talent and energy to producing Sunday school curriculum and educational programs and projects. Her charitable giving was significant, both for those charitable causes for which a tax-deductible receipt was available, and those that were truly charitable, where there was no material or financial benefit for her at all. I could go on at length, but I'm reminded of her desire to follow her mother, who famously declared that at her funeral, at her mom's funeral, she wanted no praise or laud, just honest facts. And of course, Anne was not a perfect human being. She had her struggles, she had her foibles, she sometimes expected too much of herself, and sometimes she expected too much of others. Her sense of propriety and decorum were impeccable, and when someone misbehaved in her presence or to her knowledge, she was perplexed and worried. Her concern for the welfare of those she loved was sometimes a bit overwhelming, and sometimes she was able to relate to people at the grade 2 or 3 level better than to those very same people when they were older. But as she aged, and especially after she married Henry, she became noticeably more balanced and open to new experiences and people, and she and Henry traveled extensively. Her love for Henry was beautiful to behold, all the more so because Henry did not necessarily share her openness to new ideas, and she could navigate that tricky passageway between love and respect for him and listening to the voices of the other. Perhaps the one element that bears greater emphasis than anything was Anne's constant and devoted faith in her God and her valiant efforts to understand and follow God's will for her life. She was completely at ease with God, talking with him. Note that for her, God was male, even if others in her circles saw the feminine divine. So talking with him, writing love letters to him, studying the Bible daily, praying fervently. Those times when we or others had the opportunity to discuss matters of intimate faith with her, she made it clear that she knew God and that she knew that she would be with God when she died. These were not morbid conversations dealing with the sad prospect of death, rather matter-of-fact assertions that she knew what lay ahead. And perhaps that was just as well, since her passing was so very sudden and unexpected. And now we have gathered to celebrate Anne's life, to remember her, to honor her for her faithful and loving service to God, and to each of us and to those around her who needed help. For these things, we are grateful to God. Let us now put things into the larger perspective by asking God to hear our prayer. Eternal God, we praise you that in you we live and move and have our being. We thank you for the unending life offered to us in Jesus Christ through his death on the cross and your raising him to life again. We thank you for the life of Anne Thiessen and all that she meant to us, for those things in her life which gave us glimpses of your goodness and love. Help us now to release her to you, that our grief may neither be overwhelming nor unending. Assure us of your love, strengthen our trust in your grace, and grant us your peace, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The program will now proceed unannounced as indicated in the bulletin. And although the participants are identified as to their relationship to Anne in the bulletin, those watching online may not have access to a bulletin, so let me briefly introduce today's participants. I am Erwin Warkentin, married to Val. That is Anne's sister. The meditation will be given by Ian Funk, Anne's nephew, and the scripture will be read by his son, Jonathan. Ian and his wife, Tammy Hummel, will provide special music. Vera Funk, Anne's sister-in-law, is playing piano. Johann Funk is Anne's brother, and he will deliver the eulogy and say the final prayer. Tributes and reflections will be shared by my wife, Val, and by three nieces, Heather Arupragasam, Candace Funk, and Alyssa Warkentin, my daughter, and by Anne's stepdaughter, Elaine Warkentin. Unfortunately, neither Alyssa nor Elaine are able to be here in person, so their tributes will be read on their behalf. The pallbearers at the graveside service earlier this afternoon were Ian Funk, Candace Funk, Jason Funk, Heather Arupragasam, Jonathan Funk, Bradley Funk, and Tammy Hummel, all of them being nieces or nephews or close relatives. Johann, please.
Annie Linda Funk Thiessen, January 19th, 1937 to December 28th, 2023. Annie's family and friends are saddened by her sudden and unexpected passing after a long and productive life in grounded faith and dedicated service. She's born to Anna Abraham Van Kampen Funk and David Gerhard Funk on a snowy night, much like last night, in the Ukrainian Mennonite village of Nikolaifeld. Annie's insatiable drive to be helpful and productive are tempered by the traumatic experiences as a refugee during World War II. In 1948, she emigrated to Canada with her parents and 4 siblings, living in Manitoba for 2 years and finally settling in Abbotsford, where she lived most of her life. Here the family found safety, security, and opportunity to follow their dreams. Annie graduated from Canadian Mennonite Bible College with a Bachelor of Christian Education and the University of British Columbia with a Bachelor of Education. Began a lifelong career as a well-respected elementary school teacher. Her interest in Christian education led her to collaborate in the development of curriculum for Sunday schools and General Conference Mennonite churches across North America. She conducted workshops for Sunday school teachers to introduce the material to churches in British Columbia. In 1987, she married Henry Otto Thiessen, and you've heard much about him now. They had a grand relationship, and inherited an instant loving family. Family has always been very precious to Annie, and her generosity and sympathetic ear made her much loved and significant person in the lives of her expanded circle of nieces, nephews, children, and grandchildren. After Annie retired from teaching, she and Henry attended Seven Oaks Alliance Church in Abbotsford. She also maintained a wide familiarity with the church where she was baptized, West Abbotsford Mennonite Church, which is now Level Ground Mennonite Church, and various Mennonite organizations, including Mennonite Central Committee. Her generosity extended to supporting Jericho House, an ecumenical faith-based center, volunteering at Hidden Treasures. Its name has changed now, but it's a thrift store that supports M2W and I forget. And preparing hundreds of Christmas shoe boxes, 60 shoe boxes this last Christmas alone, for Samaritan's Purse, and she's done this for many years. Anne had a wide variety of friends and interests throughout her life. Her teaching colleagues and former students remember her as an effective and caring role model. Her nieces and nephews remember her as a doting auntie. Her siblings remember her as a supportive elder sister. Her church friends remember her as a caring mentor with a deep faith. All who knew her remember her as kind, generous, thoughtful, and loving. Anne was predeceased by her parents, Anna and David Funk, husband Henry, sister Herta, and brother Victor. She is lovingly remembered by brother Johann and Vera, sister Valentine and Irvin, sister-in-law Marilyn, nieces Heather, Candace, Alyssa, and nephews Stuart, Jason, Ian, and Thor, and by Henry's daughters Elaine and Valerie, as well as their extended family members. It was Anne's greatest wish to be remembered as a kind sister and a loving aunt, and that she was. Anna's resting spared the vagaries of aging, the loss of independence, the fading of physical abilities, the hazards of cognitive decline. Annie has joined the cloud of witnesses, singing in the heavenly choir, interceding on our behalf, cheering us on to the fullness of life. And Annie is secure in the embrace of Jesus. Thanks be to God.
up on the mountain, and you've got peace of mind like you've never known. But when things change and you're down in the valley, don't lose faith, for you're never alone. And the God of the mountain is the God in the valley. When things go wrong, God makes them right. And the God in the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God of the night.
We talk of faith when we're up on the mountain. The talk comes easy when life's at its best. But in the valley of trials and temptations, that's when faith is really put to the test. And the God of the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, God makes them right. And the God in the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God of the night.
My name is Valentine Workington, and Annie's youngest sister. What's in a name? Names give us a sense of who we are, the communities in which we belong, and our place in this world. They influence our identity and honor our family history, but they never quite capture all of us. What's in a name? Annie Funk. Annie was born to David and Anna Funk in 1937. It was a snowy night in Ukraine, and she came into this world with a snowy white streak in her head. Her childhood was marked by trauma. A war was raging, and her family, along with many others, fled the scene, eventually arriving in Germany, safe. The family was to go to Paraguay with many others. And it was on the ship the Volendam. They were to go to Paraguay. But Peter Dick from MCC said, "No, Tar Dad, you will not survive the harsh climate," he said. "I will try to get you to Canada." And so he did. What's in a name? Linda. My siblings and I were not given second names when we were born. So when we became Canadian citizens, the judge said we could choose our own second names. Annie chose Linda, naming herself after a young woman in our church whom she admired. What's in a name? Anne. It did not take long after arriving in Canada that Annie became known as Anne. This name stayed with her, and when nieces and nephews came along, they affectionately called her Auntie Anne. What's in a name? Miss Funk. Miss Funk was an elementary school teacher. She loved teaching her students and consulting with her colleagues. In her retirement, she continued to connect with groups of teachers for reminiscing, for support, and for storytelling and laughter. And I believe some of you are here with us today. What's in a name? Thiessen. In 1987, Anne became part of another loving family, the Thiessen family. Anne married Henry, her dearly loved and treasured husband, a companion in daily life and a companion in traveling adventures. They had many precious years together, and then in 2016, Henry died. What a loss. But life must go on, and so must she. What's in a name? Annie Linda Funk Thiessen. Anne had a deep faith in God. She was kind and loving, human, not perfect, but unique, resilient, generous, and grateful. Anne kept a daily gratitude journal, marking each day with something big or small that she was grateful for. When I opened one of her journals last Friday when I arrived here, the first thing I read was, "Praise and thanks for a new day of sun and grace." Most entries start with words of praise and gratitude for a new day of grace and learning and salvation. Anne often talked about how grateful she was for her parents who brought us safely to Canada and for their determination to provide their children with a good education and a fruitful life. What's in a name? Sister Anne. My older sister, my friend, my mentor, my confidant, a beautiful life, well lived. The last words we said to each other the day she died were, "I love you." A precious memory I hold dear. Love lives. Anne's love lives on, in and through us. This warms my heart and fills me with memories of our happy times and of our times of sadness and grief, and the support we were to each other. Psalm 56, verse 8 is a significant comfort to me as I grieve Anne's death. God, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. I love this beautiful imagery of a bottle being filled with my tears, with the grief and pain that is in my heart. Tears are prayers that travel to God when we cannot speak. I love you, Annie Linda Funk Thiessen, but your name can never capture all of who you were. You are so much more than your earthly name. Your identity, Anne, rests in being a beloved child of God, born on eagle's wings, free and at peace. You lived by faith and died in faith, and are now part of the heavenly host, that cloud of witnesses gone before us, precious in God's sight, and precious to us who remain on this earth. I wonder, my beloved sister, what else is in your name in God's eyes? I would like to read you a poem that I wrote early one morning in Winnipeg before coming here. I couldn't sleep, and I visualized where my sister was sitting. I called it The Empty Chair. I am in shock, unprepared, dazed. The new year is fast approaching. Anne has just celebrated Christmas with Johan and Vera. But now my sister's chair sits empty. Books are scattered all around, and journals too. It was her place to sit every morning reading her devotional book to inspire her day, then writing in her gratitude journal. Big and small things she held dear. A pleasant phone call from a friend. A memory of her parents, long gone. Grateful that they left a war-torn country to bring her family to Canada. Gratitude for her sister and brother, now part of that cloud of witnesses gone before. Gratitude for a chat with a homeless person she gave a toonie to for a cup of coffee. Gratitude for independent living and for family unity. The book is filling up, but it is not finished. Her chair sits empty now. My brother and I are left to grieve and remember and to celebrate with gratitude that we had our sister with us for so many years. My brother and I are left to lay her to rest, eternal rest, until our chairs are empty too, and we join that multitude of heavenly hosts praising God.
Henry's daughter, Elaine, in Lethbridge, sent some reflections that she herself has written. She also sent some reflections from her daughter, Glenda and Brad, and then also some reflections by her sister, Valerie Stryline, in Winnipeg. None of them obviously are able to be here today. One of the reasons that Elaine is not able to be here today is because her husband has been ill. And in fact, she emailed me yesterday saying that he is in fact spending time in the emergency ward, and she is understandably very worried about him. So Elaine and John, we remember you and we pray for you. First of all, greetings to all of you gathered here to share this special time of remembering and celebrating Anne. I want to let you know how difficult it is for me not to be there with you in person. Anne's family is like part of our family since my husband John and I have met and visited with most of you over the years. We feel blessed to have known you and had your friendship. Anne always shared news about you in our conversations on the phone. She and I talked every Wednesday evening without fail. I will miss those phone calls so much. Please know that our hearts share with you the deep sense of loss that she leaves behind. And now the tribute that Elaine has shared. The first time I saw Anne was at the White Spot restaurant in Calgary. My family was living in Lethbridge, and we were invited by my dad, Henry, to meet the new lady that he was seeing. She was from Abbotsford, BC, and we knew that he had been making quite a few trips there recently. And there she stood, in a bold red suit, all tailored and classy. We were impressed. At a glance, we could see that she was just right. The right height, the right hair color, and she had the right disposition, friendly and pleasant. Well, my dad had our approval, and soon it was their wedding day. But when Anne said those two words, "I do," I don't believe she was quite aware of all that she had given herself to do. This was to become her to-do list. First, become a cook, making hearty meals that my dad liked. Second, take 3 coffee breaks with Dad each day at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m. without fail. Thirdly, bake cookies for golfing days, where my dad went regularly. Fourthly, to take the road with my dad several times a year to travel to Alberta and Manitoba to visit relatives and friends, and also travel to many other places in North America to see other relatives and acquaintances. Fifth, to be part of my dad's sibling reunions every year, which included his 6 brothers and a sister and all their spouses. It was always a crowd. And seventh, to play endless rounds of Black Queen with guests who came over, or just the 2 of them, who played every day after supper. Or finally, to take random rides with my dad out to the countryside around Abbotsford just to enjoy nature and always get over to Minter Gardens at least twice a year. My family was amazed at the way Anne put her heart into whatever this new venture of marriage required of her. She was determined to do her part, and she did. It pleased John and me so very much that Anne related so well to our young children, who were ages 5, 7, and 11 when Dad and Anne were married. Anne's early elementary teaching career served a great new purpose. And now she was suddenly a grandma, Grandma Anne. And when our own grandchildren arrived much later, she became Great-Grandma Anne. She was so delighted, and so were we. She could create fun and adventure for her grandchildren on any occasion through the early years and also later on as they became young adults. She planned a ferry ride to the island and a mailboat ride on the Okanagan, a trip to Stevenson Harbor for fish and chips, to Fort Langley and the Abbey, to name a few. There were quizzes with prizes at Christmas, and we got to act out the Christmas story with each of our family taking a part. There were Afghans and lap quilts for everyone, all crocheted with love. She never missed sending a birthday card or cards for other occasions. Of all the many adventures she planned for us, there was one that topped them all. Anne was at her best when she revealed her plan. She invited Wark and Valentine and John and myself to go with Dad and her on an Alaska cruise to celebrate my dad's 95th birthday. She booked everything herself, from the limousine that took us from their door to the harbor, the cruise and the side tours, the birthday cake and celebration on the ship. It was a grand party, and she was so delighted to provide the whole package for us in honor of my dad. For me, Anne slowly filled that void that only a mother can fill. She always waited for me to initiate the kind of closeness that was comfortable for me. She would humor me when I said, "Let's go shopping," and she would sit outside the shop on a bench and wait patiently until I was done. But the best thing Anne did for our family was to make my dad happy. That was her winning game. My dad was never short on opinions about politics or church issues, family relationships, and everything else. And here is where Anne's years of boardroom diplomacy came to good use. Her soft voice and a gentle hand on his arm communicated the calmness and reassurance that he needed. After starting so late in life, can you believe that Anne and my dad were married for 29 years? What we saw throughout those years was Anne's calming and reassuring ways. My dad never wavered in his love for Anne, and my family grew to love her with all her gentle and happy ways. We never saw that red suit again, but we saw something much more precious. It was the heart of gold that she kept inside. We will always cherish the love that she gave to us all. She filled a huge part of our lives just by being herself. Anne, Grandma Anne, and Great-Grandma Anne. We loved her, and we will miss her so very much. And then from Elaine's daughter, Glenda, Grandma Anne loved children, though she had none of her own, and was able to ease tensions and adapt to most any situation. She was gentle enough to teach grade 1 children and hearty enough to be happily married to my grandpa, who was largely set in his ways. She adapted well to being an instant grandma, and I know she enjoyed being part of our family. I loved her and miss her dearly already. And then from Glenda's husband, Brad, she was inspirational to me for her willingness to never stop learning new things and always watching out for the funniest way to do it. I suppose that was tied to her profession, but it served her so well in her life. And then finally, and I don't have this printed out, so excuse me while I get my phone in operation here, words from Valerie Stryline. My family and I were so pleased to have such a caring, compassionate wife for my dad in Abbotsford. We received her in Winnipeg even after Dad passed, and a lovely Christmas time together. I was blessed with many meaningful conversations on the phone with Mom, and usually they came around to our like-minded faith in God and what He had been teaching us recently. I admired her many acts of kindness, such as her multiple Samaritan purse boxes, volunteering at the thrift store, and making and sending cookies with Bible verses to the poor. I can only imagine how gigantic her mansion is in heaven. I await the day when we shall see her and Dad in glory.
I'm Heather Ann's niece, her brother Victor's daughter. It's my honor to share some memories of Auntie Anne. As a child, I had many sleepovers at her house. I remember her doting on us. She would have games or activities to do for us. She always had a plan for our times together. I think it was the teacher in her. She had a white Volkswagen Bug. I thought it was so cool because it looked like Herbie the Love Bug. I have memories of a trip to Kelowna in that car with her and Oma to visit John and Vera, Ian and Candace for Easter. I was maybe about 5 or 6. I remember falling asleep in the back of that car, wondering if we'd ever get there. Many years later, my brother Stu bought her Volkswagen Bug from her. It was his first car. She gave him the family discount, which he was grateful for. She built a house in the lot behind Oma's. I remember as kids, we would run back and forth between those houses through the very large vegetable garden they had together. We had many family gatherings in her house. It was important to her to bring family together. She always took time to talk to each of us and make us feel special. It was in her nature. Auntie Anne always remembered everybody's birthday. She would show up at your house with a card and a present to surprise you on your big day. She would also show up, She would go out of her way to make you feel special. My daughter Asia really liked one of the scarves she gave to her, and she wears it a lot, and now it is extra special. She loved to bake. I remember her famous gumdrop cake that she would gift us with every Christmas. She would also show up at our door on New Year's Day with fresh oliebollen and best wishes for the new year. In her later years, she would bake dozens and dozens of cookies and give them to various charities and families. Auntie Anne was a prayer. She told us she prayed for every member of our family daily. My brother Jason told me that Auntie Anne told him she also prayed specifically for his farm every day. Auntie Anne loved God and her family, was kind and generous, and was steadfast in her love and support of us. That is how we will remember her.
Hi, I'm Candace, daughter of Johann Funk, and Anne was my Auntie Anne. And I feel honored to be here, seated in the reserve section. My Auntie Anne always made me feel like a VIP. She protected our relationship by never trying to teach me, never correcting my grammar. We did have one discussion about my spelling, but that was it. It was highly likely that Anne was such a good teacher that I did not know that I was being lectured. I recall Anne often stealing me away through that kitchen garden to her house. It was a mid-century modern-esque house, and it had that cool white Volkswagen with red interior in its carport. I was very impressed by her and her achievements. I was enchanted by her poliosis, that splash of white hair, like just perfectly beautifully positioned on her scalp. Other mysterious and wonderful women shared that trait with her, such as the Bride of Frankenstein and Cruella de Vil. My Auntie Anne was the antithesis of Cruella. She was loving. She took such great care of my Oma. I am forever grateful for Anne, as I got to live my life knowing that I was loved. For that, my Auntie Anne gets an A+.
And these words are from my daughter, Alyssa. My Auntie Anne was a woman who lived her faith with great integrity, and I know how lucky I am to have had her as one of the special aunties in my life. She was loving and generous, but level-headed and pragmatic, and deeply faithful to her family and her caretaking, shepherding role in our lives. We didn't see each other very often, only every few years, if that. But we corresponded regularly by post, and I don't think she ever missed sending a birthday card to me or my sons, always carefully underlined and filled with details of her life that she wanted to share with us. How many berries she'd picked, and how much jam she'd made that week. How the thrift store was doing. How the flowers were growing in BC, and whether it was raining very much. It was an important connection, at least for me, one of the many tiny anchors that seem so trivial on the surface, but that fix and secure a life. That was her, a quiet and faithful voice of love, dependable, always there. Anne and I were very different people, and there were times in my life when I felt that our differences were greater than the parts of us that grew out of the same root. But I don't think she ever did, or if she did, I don't think she thought it mattered. She was my aunt, and she loved me, and I loved her. But now she's gone. And I keep thinking about these lines from Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River poem cycle. Just because you no more could love me, nor pray for me, nor write me letters, the eternal silence of you spoke instead. And somehow from that hour, I had a new vision. It's so strange to think that she's not out there right now sending prayers my way. She'll never send me another copiously underlined letter. Her silence will speak instead to all of us. And that's love too, a love that persists beyond even her life.
Let There Be Peace on Earth, which is one of Auntie Anne's favorites and requested hymns for today.
Peace that was meant to be.
are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on the light stand, and gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
So Annie Linda Funk Thiessen was my Auntie Anne too, another child of Johann and Vera. Anne left us a piece of paper to help us on this day. At the top of this page is written funeral notes. These notes are excellent funeral notes. They are helpful notes. They are very astute. They are deeply genuine. So I don't think I'm going to depart from those notes too much. When I read these notes, I hear Anne through and through. I see her life summarized, distilled in a few words. At the bottom of this page, it reads, "Verse to live by." And there Anne has written out the final verse from the passage that Jonathan just read. Matthew 5, verse 16. "Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in the heavens." This was truly a verse to live by for Anne. She worked very hard at letting her light shine. When she volunteered with Hidden Treasures, when she put together hundreds of shoe boxes for Samaritan's Purse, when she baked cookies every week for the homeless in Langley, when she baked for the MCC sale and volunteered every year, when she donated to various service organizations, when she gave coffee money to strangers on the street. These are only a few of the things. If we put all our heads together, I'm sure we'd come up with a more comprehensive list. Maybe we can do this. Anne loved talking about the things that she was doing. She was proud of all this work. More importantly, though, this work gave her meaning, and this work was done in love. This was one way that her light could shine. This is one way that she could be a witness to the good things in God's kingdom. And she did hope that these good and generous things she did would help others to let their light shine too. She hoped that letting her light shine before others could mean that they could glorify God too. I think that she read these words of Matthew 5:16 very closely. It was truly a verse to live by for her. And she loved it when her loved ones' lights shone. See, she desperately wanted people to be happy and healthy and fulfilled. She wanted her friends and family to pursue their dreams. She wanted us to be cared for. This was a great concern for her. Many of us have been recipients of Anne's care and generosity. Many of us have been recipients of her constant prayers. And you've heard a lot about this already. And when there was good news to tell about her family and friends,
that was the stuff of conversation for Anne. She loved to share our victories, large or small, from the tiniest amusing anecdote to our greatest successes. Anne was busy her whole life. By her own admission, she was always in a hurry. But she did take time to slow down, to meditate, to read, to study, to listen. She had her morning devotions. Her chair is still there in her living room with her journals, and until maybe yesterday, her Bible. Her Bible is now there sitting in the next room. And there were some things that she worked on constantly and deliberately in these quiet moments of meditation. She wanted to be more patient. She wanted to be more joyful, more grateful, more confident. She wanted to be included. She wanted to belong. It's all right there in her funeral notes. Anne knew many joys in her life, but there were times of sadness for her too. Maybe that's one of the reasons why she requested the song that Tammy and I sang, God on the Mountain. She needed a constant and reliable faith, with the assurance that God was with her when her joy might dip down deep in the valley. I think that Anne cherished and held close to her heart the constancy of a watchful God who would keep her from harm and hold her and sustain her in loving hands. Anne's morning devotion centered around this, especially around Psalm 121, which she memorized and recited daily. There's a copy of it in the insert there. So I thought I'd take a page out of Anne's book and memorize, or at least try to memorize, Psalm 121 for my own devotion and for this gathering, as a way of letting Anne's light continue to shine. I lift my eyes up to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who makes heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep you in your going out and your coming in, from this day on and forevermore. The Lord will keep your life from this day on and forevermore. Please read it with me. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. May Anne's light shine from this time on and forevermore. May our light shine on from this time on and forevermore.
Join me in a closing prayer, which will be followed by a congregational song to end the service. God, the source of all life, when the time was right, you took clay, formed us in your very image, and breathed into us your own living spirit. We approach you with expressions of thankfulness and praise for daily reminders of your abiding presence, for the assurance of your love in the death and resurrection of your Son, Jesus, in the people of faith throughout history who now surround us as a cloud of witnesses, for our sister Anne, who has traveled before us and experienced the fullness of life by crossing the final frontier with the calm assurance that on both sides of the barrier she is enveloped by the unending circle of your love. Teach us to turn our present sorrow into acts of remembering her infectious love of life, curiosity about the world, interest in people, delight in her extended family, commitment to Christian discipleship. Let this remembering equip us to move into the future with renewed confidence and unshaken faith in your caring and guiding presence. Let this remembering equip us to move into the future with renewed confidence and unshaken faith in your caring and guiding presence. Awaken in us and all who hear your Spirit's call a sense of amen for a life remembered, and yes, for life yet to be experienced in faith as we say our final goodbyes to Annie. Grant that we too may meet death with the serenity of a certain faith that will shine when darkness and distress disturb our earthly pilgrimage, to light the shadows of our human frailty with the truth that beyond death, your love still holds us firmly. May we, like Annie, know the victory that swallows the sting of death and return to you the gift of life with thanksgiving, joy, and peace. In the name of Jesus, our only hope for life in all its fullness. Amen.
Just a couple of announcements quickly before Tammy leads us in the final song. You are invited to a reception in the hall here immediately after the service, where you can look at some photo albums and read Anne's life story. There's several copies of it there. And you can chat with family and friends about their own memories of Anne. And also just a quick reminder that if you want to make a memorial donation in memory of Anne, there's a table, I think it was back behind in the foyer here, that's right, with information that's available to do that. It will be donations to be made to Mennonite Central Committee BC, earmarked for orphanages in Ukraine. So yeah, we can sing the final song, and then please remain seated until the family has been ushered out and the ushers indicate when you can leave here as well.